Hello, my elegant warriors. And maybe I should also say hello, my elegant advocates, because every single one of you listening, I don't care what you do or who you are, whether you are a child or an adult, man or woman, tall or short, working, not working, I don't care. You are an advocate. The definition of advocate is to advocate, is to publicly support something. And so if you have ever recommended a TV show or a movie or a book, you were advocating. I like to advocate for the TV show Ted Lasso. I don't care that it's not on anymore. I am obsessed with that show to this day, and I'm a huge advocate for Ted Lasso and that show. I want to give you an example of advocating that is pretty recognizable for all of us, even those of us like me who don't have children, and that is trying to get a child to eat their broccoli. When you are trying to get a child to eat their broccoli or their vegetables or whatever, you are advocating for broccoli. You are trying to lead the child to a decision to eat their broccoli. So leading is advocating. You are trying to sell broccoli to the kid, that you want them to actually buy, that this is delicious and something that they want to eat and maybe even better to eat than something else on their plate. So you are selling. Selling is advocating. You are also trying to provide an amazing experience of broccoli. You might be eating it yourself to show them how delicious it is. You might be mixing it into something else so they don't even know it's there. You are creating a customer experience. And for those of you listening and not watching, I put that in quotes. Customer experience, service industries, you have to advocate as well. No matter who you are or what you do, you are advocating. In the courtroom, lawyers are called advocates. That's one of the many things we're called, the nice things. I know some of you call lawyers not so nice things, but let's stick with the nice ones. And one of those things is we are advocates. We advocate for our clients in the courtroom. We are trying to lead the jury to make a decision that will ultimately serve our clients. So we are leading. We are selling our case, our evidence, our stories to the jury and hoping that they buy it. We are selling. And I really focused on the jury experience. I wanted to make sure that they were felt seen and heard and safe and special. And so I was a customer experience officer. I want to dive in a little bit deeper to how I did that because it's a big part of advocating. As a young attorney, especially, and I think this also was sort of brought about because I was a woman, and there are very few female trial attorneys. I think the number right now of those who actually try cases is less than 5%. And so most of the time, I was only the only woman in the courtroom. I was very aware of the jury. And one of the ways in which I tried to serve them and give them a positive experience was by going fast. I always felt like I don't want to hesitate and have to look for things. So I wanted to have everything at my very, very fingertips. I knew that jurors didn't really want to be there and wanted to go home to their families and their jobs. So I tried to put my case into them, sell it, and lead them to the decision I wanted them to make without taking undue time. And I did that well. And I do think that that served the jury, but it's also interesting because sometimes your perspective changes about what service is. So early in my career, one of the court reporters, the court reporter in the room, there's one court reporter in the courtroom back then. Now, sometimes it's technology that does this, but they record everything that we say, they write it all down so that we can go back later and make sure that we have a good record of what happened in the courtroom. And during a break, one of the court reporters who was so kind and so nice, he pulled me aside and he said, "You need to slow down, not just for me, because I can't get everything down that you say, but so that the jury can understand you better." And he made it so much easier for me because now I was thinking about speaking to him as well as the jury. And when I thought about speaking to him, I thought about speaking at a rate where someone could type, and that slowed me down. You might even notice that I have slowed down my pace now ever since I remembered that story. And so that's why it's important to remember and to keep your jury, which for me right now, it's you, in mind at all times. That court reporter also did me a favor because by telling me that I needed to slow down, it allowed me over the course of my career to recognize that sometimes the jury wants you to go slower. Sometimes part of their experience is the drama, the hesitation, the pauses that allow some of the information to land. And so, for you, as you are advocating, if you are in customer experience, whether that's trying to get your child to eat their broccoli or trying to make sure that your clients and customers remain clients and customers, you want to make sure that you are constantly evolving in your understanding of their perspective and in your understanding of what they need from you. When you are advocating, you are leading, you are selling, you are providing an experience. And no matter what you do, you want to be doing those three things. One of the books that really years ago made me recognize that advocating was the same as these things is the book To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. I love that book. And he makes the argument, he is also a recovering lawyer or an ex-lawyer. He made the case in that book that we are all selling all the time, that you are selling broccoli to a child. You are selling doing the laundry to your teenager. You are selling yourself to that potential spouse or partner. You are selling your products and services to your clients and customers. If you are a secretary or an administrative professional, you are selling your value to the person that you work for so that they give you raises and promotions and opportunities and resources and the things that you want. So yes, selling is human and advocating is human. But leading is also human. If you are trying to get your child to eat broccoli, you are leading them to a decision. Trying to get that partner to date you, you are leading them to a decision. Trying to get clients and customers to buy, you are leading them to a decision. So, leading, selling, they are forms of advocating, and it is absolutely human. And finally, creating an experience. Creating an experience is really about serving. Who do you serve? With the child, you want to create an experience of the broccoli. With the partner, you want to create an experience of what it's like to be with you, to be partnered up with you. Clients and customers, you want them to have the best possible experience. And that secretary, that administrative professional who serves their boss, they want to create an experience that the boss wants to repeat and grow. The main difference between leading and selling and customer experience or serving and advocating is all of those things on steroids. It's all of those things to the nth degree. Because when you are very good at it, when you are very good at advocating as leading, advocating as selling, advocating as serving and providing an experience, you turn the people around you into your advocates. This happened to me all the time in the courtroom. My favorite example was one of the times where it made a huge difference. So in my cases, I used to, for those of you that are new listeners, just to give you some background, I used to be a trial attorney. I used to try medical malpractice cases. I defended doctors, nurses, hospitals, techs in medical malpractice cases. And I did that primarily in Philadelphia. And I mention that because different jurisdictions have different rules as to the number of jurors that you have in the courtroom. In our cases, we always had 12 jurors. And so my job was to advocate to them, lead them to the conclusion that I wanted them to make, sell them my case, and make it so that they wouldn't buy the other side's case, give them an experience that made them like me and want to serve me and give me what I wanted. And so I did that throughout this particular case that I remember so well. And at the end of the trial, the jury goes to deliberate. And one of the things I recognized pretty early in my career is that I didn't want to just advocate to my jurors. I also wanted to turn them into advocates. I wanted to make it so that when they went into the jury deliberation room, they would say things like, remember that piece of evidence that Heather showed us? Remember that story that Heather told us about? Remember when Heather asked Dr. X about this thing and he or she said this? Remember when Heather cross-examined the other side's expert and they said this? I want them to be advocating for me, to be publicly supporting me in the jury deliberation room, to be leading the other jurors to a decision that benefited me and my client, to be selling jurors who might have doubts on me and our case, and to be giving them an experience that wasn't nasty, not yelling or screaming about it, but a positive experience. And so I would work to focus on specific pieces of evidence that would be easily shared and tell stories that could be easily remembered and shared. And in this particular case, the jury went to deliberate and they were out, that's what we call it, they're out deliberating for days. And myself and the opposing attorney were pacing the hallways, sort of grinning at each other and then grimacing at each other as we would pass one another, and the time went by. Now, normally in my work, it's especially nerve-wracking if the jury's out for a long time, because we often think that the jury can come to an agreement pretty quickly with respect to whether or not the doctor was negligent and whether or not the negligence caused the injury. But sometimes we believe it takes more time to decide how much is that worth? How much are they going to give to the patient if they decide that way? And so the longer it goes, the more the defense side gets nervous. And we often do things like we try to settle the case. We call our insurance companies and we say, look, the jury's been out a day, 2 days. We need to start making an offer. And we did that here. We made an offer to settle the case. The other attorney brought it to his client. She said no, so we kept waiting. Ultimately, after a lot of shenanigans that we don't need to go into here, the jury came back and they were hung. They could not come to an agreement. They had tried, we sent them back again. They gave the charge to try to make them come to an agreement. They could not come to an agreement, so they were hung. So we came back to the courtroom and the judge thanked them for their service. And then the judge said, if you want to talk to the attorneys, you can, don't feel any obligation. And so they did. And so we went back into the room, and myself and the opposing attorney, we talked to them. And it turned out that when they first went back to deliberate, let me back up. We have 12 jurors. In my cases, 10, it doesn't have to be unanimous because it's civil and not criminal. So in my cases, 10 of the 12 jurors have to agree. And when they went back, there were 9 of the jurors. So 9 of the 12 jurors agreed for the patient's side. One was sort of on the fence. So let's say 8. 8 of the 12 jurors agreed with the patient. They felt that the patient had won. But there were 4 who felt very strongly that the patient had not won. And those 4 advocated for me. Now, the 8 were also advocating, I'm sure. They wanted the patient to win. The 4 that were on my side wanted me to win. And so ultimately, all that time that they were out deliberating, they were sort of advocating for their various positions. And ultimately, my 4 persuaded 2 more. And so now they were not closer to a verdict. You know, if they had gotten to 9, then they might get to 10, but instead they were further away from a verdict. They were tied 6-6, and that's where they stuck. And so they talked to us about the fact that they had gotten into disagreements. They were all very civil and very kind to each other as they argued. You could tell this jury liked each other. But they had really disagreed. And they told us the reasons why. And this is an interesting point as well. They told us, oh, I loved this witness. I didn't like this witness. This witness said this and it didn't make sense to me. And of course, the other attorney and I are writing down notes fast and furious. And one particular witness of mine, my expert, they were not a fan of. Even the ones that advocated for me were like, so-so. And ultimately, the case was a mistrial. But the only reason it was a mistrial is because I turned enough of those jurors into advocates, and they advocated well enough with enough evidence and stories to actually influence the other jurors. And you can turn the people around you into your advocates as well. If you are a leader and you are advocating for change, you are much more likely to get that change if the people on your team become your advocates. So they say things like, oh, come on, this is going to be the best thing ever for us, and this is why. Remember that he or she said this. Remember they told us this. You've turned them into an advocate. If you're in sales and you turn a prospect or a client or a customer into an advocate, then they refer other business to you. They send other business to you. And if you are in a customer experience or service, you know that is exactly what you want. You want people to stay and you want them to refer other business. And when you teach people how to advocate for you by advocating effectively to them and giving them stories and evidence to advocate for you, you turn them into your advocates. I'm going to have a whole episode on the specifics of how to do that, but you should know that it's an important part of advocating, and it is what to me makes advocating better than selling or leading or customer experience alone. So what is advocating? I keep talking about it, but what do you have to do in order to get this done? It's 3 steps. It is knowing what you want, asking for it out loud and with delight, and mastering the art of the ask. So most of the time in business anyway, which is sort of what we're talking about today, you know what you want. You want the sale. You want the client, you want the customer, you want the positive review, you want the person to go out and advocate for you. If you're a leader, you want that change to happen and to happen in a way that the team is supportive of and even excited about and even delighted about. So you know what you want. You know you want your child to eat the broccoli. And then you ask with delight. Now, that part of the advocacy 3 steps is really making sure that you are in full belief, that you are delighted with broccoli, that you are delighted with the change you're asking your team to make, that you are delighted with your service or your product or the thing that you are selling, that you are delighted with the experience that you are providing to your clients or customers or friends or family. And that is where that second step comes in. It's your belief, your delight. And then the third step is mastering the art of the ask. And this right now is our most important part in business. This is where facts become evidence that actually proves something to someone and isn't just random facts. Because in the courtroom, we have the same facts. Everyone in the room, me and opposing counsel in that mistrial case, we had the same facts, but we used it to turn it into evidence in different ways to prove different things. Same things with stories. Sometimes we had differing stories, and often we had the same story, but we told it in a different way from a different perspective in order to influence our juries. You have your juries too. And if you can learn how to master the art of the ask, that's where you become a strong advocate and you start getting what you want. That's why I always say facts tell, stories sell, but advocates win. Because storytelling isn't enough. Storytelling is great, but when there's an opposing story, there's broccoli versus brownies, change that a leader wants versus staying the same, your product versus a competitor's product, your experience versus someone else's experience. Storytelling isn't enough. You've got to learn to advocate, to turn stories into proof and facts into evidence. And that is what I'm going to continue to teach you over and over again in this podcast, exactly how to do that. But a big part of doing that is seeing things from the other person's perspective and specifically from your jury's perspective, the people that you are serving, the people you are leading, the people you are selling to, the people that you are giving an experience to. You need to see things from their perspective. Communicating is sharing perspectives. Advocating is changing them. But you can't change someone's perspective until you understand it, until you really know their perspective and where it comes from, and until you understand that there are different perspectives. There are different ways of seeing this. In the show notes, I have a link to 3 exercises, 3 perspective exercises that help you to start to see other perspectives. They help you to start to see that there are other perspectives and how to take them and how to tell stories about them. One is the victim, villain, victor exercise. One is the bud exercise, and one is the rubber band exercise. If you want access to those, hit the link in the show notes and you will get access to all 3 of those exercises. They are amazing to help you to become better at seeing other perspectives. And there will be entire episodes on that topic, but those 3 exercises are the foundation for you to get in the practice of doing this. So mastering the art of the ask is seeing things from different perspectives and then speaking to that perspective. Because when you do that, your jury, your team, your clients or customers, the people you serve, they will advocate for you. They will know what you want. They will be delighted to ask for it on your behalf because they believe in you. And you will have given them the assets, the evidence, the stories that they can take out and advocate for you. And that is why every one of you wants to learn this tool, learn this skill, master it, so that you can ask for anything that you want and get it. If you are leading, you are advocating for change, for the things that you want, for the things that are important to you and to the organization. Now, your jury might be one person or many. Most of the time for leaders, it is many. And that's why in future episodes of this podcast, we're going to talk specifically about how to advocate to a group. But when you're leading for today, know that you are going to be focused on mastering the art of the ask by seeing things from the perspective of whomever it is that you want to influence. If you are selling, you might be selling to one or many. Same deal. We're going to be talking about how to advocate to a group. But for today, just know your jury, know your client, your customer, your prospect, and what they want and what they need. And that will make you a stronger advocate. And if you are providing a customer experience, that's usually too many. And so we're going to be talking specifically about that. But just know today that you want to influence and persuade by seeing things from their perspective and then speaking to that perspective. Ultimately, this all comes down to building belief. An advocate knows how to build belief. First, our own, so that we can ask with delight, and then others, those we lead, those we sell to, those we serve, those we want to eat their broccoli. And I really know that when you stick with this podcast, or if you even better, a little step above the free is the Self Advocacy School, where I teach people like you the specifics on how to do that. The link to join us is in the bio. But if you join us there, you get these skills faster and more tailored to you. I do live coaching once a week with you in the Zoom room. I am there to answer your questions. I provide some resources there that I don't provide here. There's a community that supports each other. There's specific classes on how to use evidence, how to create and collect evidence. It's a very low price point. It's $97 a month and you can cancel anytime. The link for that is in the show notes as well. The doors to that as a founding member are going to close in February. And when they do, you will not get the benefits of a founding member. So if that's interesting to you, you want to go ahead and click that link and join us. But that my life's goal is to teach people like you how to advocate. The last way that you can do that is if you are in an organization, if you are a leader or are in sales and want to bring me in to train your team or to do a keynote for your team, I can do that as well. But I teach people how to build belief, first in themselves and then in others, and then repeat it over and over and over again, because that is how you begin to turn people around you into your advocates. Let me end with one of my favorite stories from the courtroom. And this is a perfect example of how I turned a jury into my advocates. This was a case, I was actually quite young and was really felt over my head trying this particular case. It was high damages. It was a very important client. And I had prepared for the cross-examination of the other side's expert for months, and I was ready. And when it came time to cross-examine that expert, I was in flow. If you know what that means, it's time has no meaning. You don't remember what you're doing. I put down my notes, I put down my legal pad, and I just remembered everything that I had done. Page numbers of depositions, articles, they were just at the top of my head. It was a moment that I will never forget. And I was cross-examining this expert and I was eating him alive. I just was. I knew I was, I felt it. It was, again, a moment I will never forget. It doesn't always happen that way. I don't want to sound like I'm, arrogant, but sometimes it does. And when it does, you know it. And he was squirming and I knew it was coming to lunchtime and I didn't have that much more to go. And I wanted to get through it before lunch break so that I would leave the jury with the memory of me really eviscerating this witness before lunch. And I was getting there and the judge looked at the clock and she said, it's coming time for a lunch break. And as an advocate, I am always aware of the jury's experience. So I would never say, I've seen some lawyers do this. This is something that I would never do because of my attending to the jury's experience. I would never say, "Oh, judge, I'm almost done. Please let me finish." Because what if one of the jurors is starving? What if one of the jurors really has to go to the bathroom? And then they resent me the rest of the trial because I stopped them from what they needed. So I did not say that. I nodded my head. And one of the jurors, and they're not supposed to do this, yelled out to the judge, "Let her finish." Didn't really yell, just said, "Let her finish." And the rest of the jury, or enough of them that it sounded like it was all of them, like said, "Yeah, yeah." And then the judge asked them, "Do you want to finish cross-examination before lunch?" And they all nodded. And so she let me continue. It still makes me even a little bit emotional because I was young and I was afraid. And that juror advocated for me. And not only it was a woman, did she make me feel like I was doing a good job and reinforce what I already believed, but she made me believe in my case even more. And I finished my cross-examination It was amazing. It was the best cross-examination I have ever given. And we won that case. And it was quite an experience. And I don't know why it just made me emotional, but it did. But that juror became my advocate. And she did so because she believed. I had built belief in her. And she was having a fun experience. I think that the jurors like it when there's a witness who's clearly lying and the attorney is doing a good job in showing that. It becomes almost entertainment. You can do this too. This is not the job of an attorney. It's the job of a parent trying to get their child to eat broccoli. And all you need to do is to learn the tools that I teach. And so please, 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 if this has resonated with you, please share it. I want as many people as possible to recognize that advocating is a skill and that you can learn it by just listening to this podcast. I will be back next week. I have so many important episodes planned for you. We're going to talk about negotiating. I have training and many, many years of experience in that as well. We're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about selling. We're going to talk about body language. We're going to talk about listening. We're going to talk about eye contact. So many things in this podcast, and even more, even deeper in the self advocacy school. So remember, there's 2 links you want to pay attention to in the show notes. 1, you can get those 3 perspective exercises in the show notes. Just click on that link. And 2, if you want to join us before the doors close to the founding members, and there's lots of things founding members get that the rest won't get. The doors are going to be closed for a matter of months. So if you want to get in and do this work, now is the time. Thank you for your time. I hope that you have a great week and take good care.